What's up, everybody? Got man, like I don't know, like it feels weird to call you Reggie Parker. Like
You're old now, so you can.
I don't know, man, like I got the authority, I have the maturity level now is I feel like it's still got to be like Officer Parker from way back in Simmons Middle School days.
Nope. I recently retired. So, matter of fact, I hadn't been policing since 2021. So I switched over. I still work for Hoover until recently when I retired. But I went doing therapy for the first responders in 2021. So I hadn't been in uniform for a while. Prior to that, I was in the investigation unit. So I was wearing plain clothes. So I hadn't felt like an officer in a long
Long,
time, brother.
long time, long time. I love it. I love it. Well, before we get into like the whole journey is I know you and I have like shared conversations back and forth via social media. So like I'm super intrigued because again, it's like obviously it's like I knew you as an officer back then, and as I think there's a lot of synergy in like what we're doing today. So like I'm intrigued with the conversation. But
Mhm.
as always, before we get things kicked off, wild or funny story. What you got for everybody?
Oh, let me think. Okay, let me go back to my university, Jacksonville State Police Department. Now, back in the day, let's see, 93, I'm
Okay.
working $6.46 an hour. So the calls right at the very end before I left to come to Hoover PD getting more intense and more intense. So we get a call to help out the Jacksonville City PD of a burglary in progress. Get on the scene, you can see where the suspect had made entry. So they put me on one end of the alley and another officer's on the other end of the alley. To be respectful, let's just say he did not try to curb any of his dietary intake. So I saw him down on the other end, and it looked like Charlie's Angels, and his gun was just really, really shaking. And I thought to myself, I don't know what I'm more afraid of, the suspect coming out or him shooting me. So I was trying to reposition myself because I'm like, I really want to go home safe, but the way
Yeah,
he's holding
yeah.
that gun and the way he's shaking, I could just see his whole body shaking from the other end. So uh, after that day, shortly thereafter, I transferred out and went to Hoover. So that's my short story of funnies.
Was that, I'm curious because I got a kind of like a follow-up. It makes me think of something. Was that his first like interaction in terms of like pulling a gun, being on like
I
being
have
called to a
no idea because he had been there for a while. Whether
yeah.
he had an encounter like that or not, I don't know. But I just remember looking at him down across from me, and I was thinking, this is crossfire at its best. And I hope I'm not the target that he hits.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It makes me I was talking I we had talked previously is high school wrestling buddy of mine, Austin Milster, went to West Point, went through Ranger School, and he said like when he first got deployed, he was like, because I told him a story I listened to, the guy that owns Black Rifle Coffee that was Green Beret, I think it was like back in the
Hmm.
day. And he was on Rogan's podcast and he made the statement. He was just like, anybody that goes to war that tells you the moment they're getting shot at, he said if they tell you they're not scared like the very first time, he's like either one of two things: either they're like psycho up in the head, like something's wrong, they got some screws loosened,
Right.
or they're just fucking lying to you.
Preach.
Like one
Preach.
one one of the two. And Austin was like, dude, I'm so glad he said it because he was just like, I remember, that first deployment. He's like, the first time you're getting shot at is was like an oh
Yeah.
shit moment of like, okay, like I have to literally go everything back to like my preparation and how I've trained and like trust all that. So
You
yeah,
better
it's just
believe
your
it. Because I remember we had a 13-hour standoff. Guy had shot at us 44 times. And the way I was positioned, I felt the bullets, the heat of them passing by me, impacting the car next to me. And I thought, God, we gonna make it out of here? You talking about scared?
yeah,
I
yeah,
was scared, and I thought, you know what? This is it was one of those things. It's good to be here, but it's bad to
yeah,
be here. So I
yeah,
had a different mindset. So yeah, it was pretty intense.
yeah. Awesome. Well, before we go like full journey of like your story a little bit is I'm a little bit intrigued because I want to tie this into like leadership is influence to me. Like if I had to sum like leadership up into one word, it would be influence. And correct, like you are part of like or lead, I don't know, you can fill me in, is like part of like the negotiation team,
Hmm.
correct? Is that yeah?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, I've
so
seen
it's
that
like I
before.
guess my question is, what was it like? What are the things like as you took on that role? Because obviously you have to influence somebody. Somebody has a picture in their brain that they're trying to do, whether that be, I guess, like a hostage situation or like whatever the scenario may be, and you have to influence them in a way to make ultimately a different decision, change the stories, change the beliefs like in their brain. And so it's like I'm super intrigued because I think that relates to obviously, the sports world, honestly, even the business world, in terms of getting people to see the world differently. And in that scenario is it's rapid fire, right? Like there's not a whole lot of time, so to speak. And so what was it that like what are the major things that you learned and you adopted in terms of your ability to influence people? Because I'm super intrigued with that.
Well, one of the main things that I've learned is you got to know yourself first.
Mm.
And I remember when I went through the counseling program, the first thing the professor said is, "Counselor, know thyself." Ah, yeah. So the thing is, what I carried with me is when you go through the negotiation program, I did the FBI training, ATF training, the PATC, the Public Agency Training Council. And what they do is they give us different skill sets to which to work from. And I like to call it framing up the conversation.
Hmm.
Because the thing is, when when you go, when you get that call, you know things have jumped off the rails. And what I used to like to train and teach my officers, the guys that work for me, is we got to learn how to walk people down the path. And the
Mm.
things that I would look at is everybody wants to be heard. It's just unfortunate the people that we show up with, they're choosing this means to be seen and heard. And what we got to do is the foundational tool. When you get strip it all down, get to the basics, is active listening skills.
Mm.
If you can listen well, you can speak well. But if you can't listen well, you can't speak well. And one of the main things that we focus on a lot is actually listening to the person that is in crisis. Because what I used to always ask when I taught class is, how many of you have ever taken a test without reading instructions? Now, obviously, somebody say, "Yeah, I did." But what happens is, even in these critical situations, people are giving us the instructions. But what happens a lot of times,
Mm.
we don't like the presentation. They're telling us what's
Ah.
going on, but we don't like the words that they're using. And sometimes, if you haven't trained to be comfortable being uncomfortable, you lose that person because you're not actually listening to what they're actually telling you. And a lot of times, we can unlock a lot of the frustration by just listening to the words they're actually speaking. That's just the basics. It's a little bit more to that, but that's just a starter.
That's fascinating because okay, I'm assuming here is, and again, we'll get to the full journey, but in terms of like counseling and the things that you're doing now is probably the same thing.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it is because what you got. Well, here's the difference. So, policing is an uncontrolled environment.
Mm,
And it's a
hmm.
fluid situation, and then most time there's guns involved. And then another hurdle, especially if they could see us, that I had to cross was getting past the uniform. You know, because when you're looking out the window and you see the guys, the black ninjas running around, you got to move through all of that. And what we use is this stairwell, or I like to call it the Maslow hierarchy of needs. What I
Hmm.
understood is we got to be able to provide people with, if they ask, food, water, shelter, safety. And safety was the most important. How could I convince somebody that I'm there for them when I got all these people running around with these guns
Mm.
and now they're coming to their senses and they're like, I wanted attention, but I didn't want this type of attention. So to be able to have the skill set to actually sell to them that my ideas is going to be what's best for them for the outcome to be what they wanted. And most times it's just to be seen and heard. But once everything is unfolding and then they see the new environment that they kind of in control of sometimes,
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes they're not in control of it. So when you're talking about a psychological warfare, well, there you go right there.
yeah. That's fascinating. That is, yeah, because then, like you said, this is in counseling, it's 100% controlled. It's like, and for the most part, I would say probably the other difference that stands out is for the most part, probably people that show up to counseling is like they want to be there. You know, maybe there's a small percentage that are kind of like nudged, like, hey, this is what you need. You need to go do this type thing.
Mhm.
Um, versus in a negotiation situation in terms of like hostage or whatever is like at the beginning, they do not want your ass there.
No, not at all. Go away.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
let me answer your question because I didn't answer the difference between when somebody walks into my office to sit down for therapy. Well, what you got to do, the hardest thing that I've learned from what people have to do is picking up the phone and making that call.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
monumental step to say things have gotten so far out of hand in my life that I need some assistance because I'm feeling overwhelmed,
Hmm.
don't know what to do, and then to actually build enough rapport with people to get them to be able to open up those areas of darkness that they haven't shared with anybody. Because the problem that a lot of us have is don't know about emotions. Nobody has ever taught us how to sit with your emotions. So what we do is we move through them using different things to numb what we're dealing with. So for somebody to sit down and actually open up and share those deep dark secrets that they more than likely haven't shared with anybody else, that's the biggest hurdle when they come in my office. But I'm a little bit more prepared because on the police side of it, like I just said, that's uncontrolled environment. But when you come into my office, it's a lot more control. So I can actually focus a little bit more, so to speak, when somebody walks into my office as a civilian.
How many of, I think how to ask this question, like what percentage or how many of the people is a part of that big hurdle? Like you said, is the biggest hurdle is step one is kind of like picking up that phone or seeking the help, asking like, hey, like I'm at rock bottom, shit's hitting the fan, like I'm gonna lose my own life, I'm gonna lose like a marriage, I'm gonna lose relationships with kids or friends or family, like whoever. And so how much of that is the fear of picking up the phone is just the stigma of like now you basically have to admit something is wrong, right? Like, and I think there's a big, like, obviously is in my side of things is encouraging, athletes is just because you come talk to me doesn't mean like you're a bad person or something is like totally wrong like in your life. You know what I'm saying? And so
Mm-hmm.
how much of that like initial conversation is helping them overcome like just the stigma of like the way I don't know society that that's my big enemy, right? Like society placed on you. So is that would you agree that that's kind of a true statement? And how is it that you kind of approached that and encouraging them that as I would say, is you're frustrated. That's normal. It's called being a human.
Right. So let me ask you this question, then I'm gonna answer it. So anytime if somebody says they're going to therapy, what's the first thing people say to them? You're
What's
weak.
wrong?
What's
Oh,
wrong with
you're
you?
weak. Yeah, yeah.
You can't handle your own stuff. So that's one
Yeah.
of the biggest hurdles. You just mentioned it when you said stigma. What's the stigma behind getting therapy? You can't handle your own problems? Suck it up, be a man. Because growing up, what have we been taught most of the time? It's okay to be angry and pissed off, but it's not okay to be hurt. So what we do is like, well, especially as athletes, like, yeah, I don't want to go to therapy because if people find out, they don't think I can cut it.
Mm.
Like when I was an officer, when we had a critical incident and I knew it bothered me, I'm looking around at people who I felt like were the strongest, the macho looking guys, and I'm like, they look like they're handling that stuff just fine. What is wrong with me? And I think when people take inventory of themselves, because of how we have been raised, suck it up, be a man, don't be a wimp. Don't go out and telling people your business because they won't see you the same way. I think that's the struggle with the stigma. And then now I got to get a third party intermediary to actually come in and help me deal with my stuff at my house. I'm a man. I should be able to handle this on my own. And when we come to the realization that we can't, I think that's the struggle to actually pick up the phone and say, I need help. It's just like a lot of men. You're driving around before we had Siri or maps. We would
Mm-hmm.
not ask for directions. And I think that's the same thing when we talk about, being mentally well. I think that's the same mindset that a lot of us have is I have a hard time asking for help. And that's where I think the struggle is of people actually pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm in trouble and I need your help. That's hard to actually say. I do this, and it's hard to say when I'm struggling sometimes. Like,
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
I don't want people to know that I'm struggling because I want to smile, act like everything's okay, even when it's not.
Yeah, it makes me think of too, and I'm curious with, I guess, A, is a lot of the people that you counsel, like work with, people that seek you out, are they officers, like military, kind of like, I guess, first responder kind of type people that deal with like true crisis, true trauma in terms of like the things that they witness. Because it's interesting. It's funny. I literally watched this last night. Is I watched that documentary of like Black Hawk Down, and they were
Mm-hmm.
talking with at the very 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 end. It was one of kind of like the primary guys that they were interviewing. Is he started to get kind of emotional, and he was just like, it's interesting because they teach. I'm gonna paraphrase. I'm gonna butcher his words a little bit. So my apologies. But he was like, they teach us to be warriors. They teach us to go out and kill, but they don't teach us how to handle it when we get back. They don't teach us how to like because those are vivid, vivid. I mean, I can't imagine, right? Like those are images and movies in their brains that again, we remember things best through emotions. And it's like, those are high intent, those are high emotional situations. Like, you're not, we all remember where we were September 11th, right? And
Yes.
most of us weren't even quote unquote attacked, right? It's like, I literally, I was at Simmons Middle School, Miss Martin's eighth grade math class, and a kid named Tyler Boswell yelled out something wildly inappropriate, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like that's hardwired into our brain.
Right.
And so is that another kind of like hurdle of like, hey, it's okay. We just haven't been taught this yet. And I'm going to help teach you this because you just haven't been equipped. You haven't given the tools. You haven't given the ways to behave and the lens to look at things through. Is that kind of like a big piece of it at the beginning too, of getting them to understand? It's like, hey, it's okay. We just haven't been taught this yet.
Right. Well, yes, everybody, excuse me, everybody deals with trauma
Mm-hmm.
because think about the wife domestic abuse situation. Think about the child seeing it. Think about when you
Mm-hmm.
turn on Fox 6, ABC 3340, or anything else, vicarious trauma. We see it over and over and over again. Sometimes we think we're desensitized to it, but it
Yeah.
comes out in other ways. Uh, for first responders, well, you can multiply that. So, what the stats show is civilians may experience 2 to 3 traumatic events in a lifetime. An officer, if they work 20 years on the street, on average, they experience 200 traumatic
Damn.
events.
Damn.
So you can only imagine the things that we deal with. Talk about me. And this is what I say to them all. This is when we lie. We deal with a lot of different situations. And what we'll do is we'll hide behind it and say we're okay
Yeah.
until we're not okay. And my experience, and when I talk to first responders, I share my story because I went on a call where a little 7-year-old girl was killed. And we probably were there, I don't know, 10 hours because the male suspect that killed her was barricaded in the home. And eventually he came out. I wish he would have came out a different kind of way, but he didn't. He came out walking, unfortunately. And when things were all said and done, and the scene was clear. The sergeant asked me, "You good?" What did I say, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm good.
And therein lies the problem because I felt like I had to do that. And the thing is, that started me on the journey that I'm on right now is because I was not good.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep for 3 months, if not
Damn.
longer, because every time I tried to go to sleep, I would dream about that little girl. The problem was with that dream, I couldn't see her face. And the thing that bothered me most is I couldn't see her face because it was my daughter's face, who was 7 at the same time.
Oh,
And that
damn.
bothered me and bothered me. And I thought, you know what? If I'm dealing with this, I know other people got to be dealing with it. And when they talk about the hypervigilance, the hair standing up on the back of your neck, you dissociating, you trying to doing the amygdala hijack because I'm trying to numb myself. I don't want to feel this emotion because I can't handle it. And I don't want anybody else to know that I'm struggling because I have this macho job and I
Mm-hmm.
just can't go into work and let people know I'm struggling. So, guess what I did? I hid behind the shield of perfectionism. Oh, I talk like everything's okay. I walk like everything's okay. And I smile walking into work like everything's okay when I'm actually struggling. So what I do is I want people to know I want to create an environment and let people know it's okay not to be okay sometimes. I don't want you to stay there,
Right.
but emotions is what it means to be human. And we've been told all our lives, suck it up and be a man. What does that even mean? So
Yeah.
when I dealt with my stuff, as far as having the PTSD symptoms, I knew I can't be the only one dealing with this. So that's what started me on my journey to be able to reach out and start helping other first responders with the things that they've dealt with.
So was that kind of, I don't want to say aha moment, but
Yes, it was.
was
You
that
can say, aha,
the
aha, I'm struggling. Yes, it was. It was like, you know what? Aha, this stuff is real. Because you hear about PTSD, a lot of times we associate
Yeah.
that just with the military, right?
Yep, yep.
But what about the cumulative PTSD? I mean, I'm going on car wrecks. I'm going on suicides. I'm going on all these other different things over and over and over again. I'm seeing this stuff that I know people shouldn't see, but for whatever reason, before I had kids, I don't know, it seemed different. As soon as I had kids, it was like the light bulb came on. I think, oh God, I got to deal with my
Yeah.
own mortality. I got to be
Yeah.
okay. So the aha came when, God, this stuff is actually bothering me, and how is it impacting me and my relationship with my family? So yeah, it was an aha moment for me.
So then was the next step for you to get your own help and like I
Yes.
guess walk me through that journey and what was it, how did you start to peel back the layers of the onions, uncover things a little bit about yourself, but then ultimately is like you're kind of creating a little bit of a new version of you, right? It's like I'm disregarding, I'm killing off. There's pieces of this old me that I'm going to kill off and I'm going to put like throw to the side because I need to create this new version of me. What was, walk me through that a little bit and then ultimately how long at like what was the gap to like okay like now I'm gonna be sent on this journey as I think I told you is it's very similar. It's like turning your mess into your message, right? Like your own pain and struggles, your own hurdles of like, hey, I experienced this. I don't want other people to go through this. I want them to live a life of pleasure, right? Live a life of joy and excitement and abundance and freedom, whatever that means to like each person. So I guess kind of like walk me through that journey a little bit of how you reached out, what was that conversation like, and then what ultimately, was your big aha to like that was kind of I told you it was like the whole who are you, right? Like when Deborah asked me, right? And so
Mhm.
what was that? Was there a defining moment for you within that?
Well, I kind of did the cheat code. I was like, I think I need to go back to school because I'm asking these different therapists, how do we help these people? Now, in actuality, I'm asking for myself, but I was like, I need to go back to go to school for counseling to figure out, how this works because I want to be able to carve out when we're talking to different people that different dealing with different situations. We need to know how to walk them down the path. So, I think that's what we need to do. Now, if I'm being honest, what happened was a new Hoover did a tuition reimbursement. I thought maybe I can learn some stuff to actually help me
Yeah, yeah,
to deal with my stuff. So what I did, kind of a roundabout way, I was searching for answers without me actually calling up somebody and sitting in front of
yeah.
them and talking about
Mm,
my own stuff.
mm,
So it took me to finish the program. So I went straight through it. Probably it's supposed to be 2 years. I did it like a year and 8 months,
mm-hmm.
and then I had to go through supervision, which I had to get 3,000 hours of all of that. That's neither here nor there. But what I started learning was after I started talking to my supervisor as far as in supervision, start opening up a little bit about what I was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was it started shedding the light on things that I didn't realize that I had been holding on to that had happened in childhood,
Yeah.
that had happened in middle school, high school, college. And I didn't realize that I had some pent up anger, pent up resentment because I grew up single parent home, never spent one night in the same home with my dad. And, I was walking around trying to validate myself all these years and didn't even realize it because I felt
Yeah.
like I didn't measure up. Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
6'6", 240. Everybody think, well, Reggie's got it all as far as the athletic part of it. Yeah, I did good. I made McDonald's All American, all this other stuff. But what people didn't know was, you know, Proposition 48 came out in 1987 when I was graduating high school. Auburn University used to be up at my school every single day recruiting me until they weren't. Because when Proposition 48 came out, there were certain criteria that you had to meet to be eligible. Well, I didn't meet that criteria. So the Alabamas, the Auburns, the LSU, the Tennessee, all these phone calls I got, all of a sudden stopped. And I thank God now I went to Jacksonville State. Thank God I could play basketball too. I made the McDonald's All American. But I felt like football was my ticket because I felt like it was like chewing bubblegum and walking.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that stripped from me. I moved on, didn't realize how it was impacting me. Get to college, I realized, well, this basketball thing ain't gonna work out. So I might want to stop playing in the classroom and actually start getting my studies. Fast forward, graduate, start working for the UPD. So I had certain calls that actually impacted me that I didn't realize impacted me. I'm just out of college, that athlete, moving on, moved to Hoover. Yeah, the money was better. Outwardly people thought, yeah, Reggie's doing really well. He's got a lot going on, but inside I'm secretly suffering.
Yeah.
Did I tell anybody? No, no, because I can't let anybody know. So move on and on. Have that call that I just told you about the little girl. All of it, all of a sudden, just came flooding back, and I'm thinking, this stuff is unfolding so fast. I can't even comprehend what's going on.
Yeah.
I've got to hit the brakes to do something to actually help me to be able to deal with it. And then I was introduced to the world of therapy, and I thought, okay, not the only one. I'm not crazy. This is normal.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, I thought, I'm not measuring up. I can't tell anybody because, like, if I tell them what's going on in my head, they're going to deem me unfit for duty. I need my job. So I got anxiety, got fear about that. I'm having these dreams, having other things come up. I'm like, I hadn't dealt with that in high school. Now it's all of a sudden it's coming up and it's over and over and over again. So I'm drinking, I'm partying, I'm doing all this other stuff, trying to just numb the pain that I'm feeling. And I'm like, I'm struggling, but everybody else think I'm doing good. So that's what started me on my journey in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
And then what I started doing after I got a little bit older, probably about 35, I started digging in because then I had been married about 4 years. I start digging in. Okay, so what's going on with me that I've been hiding and haven't been dealing with? And I kind of tried to hide it through the counseling program
Hmm.
and going on a roundabout way instead of actually picking up the phone because that was hard for me to actually pick up the phone and say I need help. So I did it going through the counseling program, actually bouncing ideas of what somebody else may have been going through and how you think I should help them handle it. So inadvertently, I was asking questions for myself
Yeah.
as though it was somebody else.
It's actually probably more in a certain way, it's probably more powerful that way. Like your journey of uncovering, because it's low key kind of interesting because like one of the things of like starting the new year is like I like to educate myself, as you can see, right? Like I enjoy reading, I enjoy all the things in terms of gaining knowledge, gaining wisdom, whether that be reading or even just conversations like this. But oftentimes I've caught myself like, ooh, that would be powerful for this athlete, or that would be powerful for this team, or that would be really good to like add into like this piece of my framework. And I think for years, a lot of time is like I was missing the puzzle of like, this would be powerful for you, Ryan. And so I was always thinking about like how do I implement this like for
Right.
other people? So it like it's kind of intriguing that I think in some ways is it was probably really powerful to like go through that program and 100% think about you at some level, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the facade was I'm doing this to like learn to teach others, which is was true at some level, but ultimately it's like how do I figure this out like for me at the beginning first. And so
Right.
because I think that a lot of people miss that boat is like that are teachers, coaches, whoever, is they read all the like, especially coaches, right? It's like they read all the leadership books and then they like, y'all should do this. And it's like, yeah, but you don't do that. So that's actually like not going to work out, right? And
Right.
so, you know, it's you actually lived your journey as like one of my coaches now is like, one of his primary messages to me is like Ryan, like you have to be the walking billboard. Like you have to, like you can't like teach all
Yeah.
these things. You can't talk this whole framework. It like it can't just be like words that you're teaching. Is like you must show and prove that you're living that life. That it's not you watched a YouTube video or read a book.
Yes. And that's the thing that I do is when I go in and I teach first responders, I tell them, I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. I know what it sounds like. And I know what it smells like. And I create an environment for people to be able to be themselves. So what I do is I share my story, and that's part of my healing. And I do it over and over and over again. And the more I tell my story, the more empowering it is for me because when I felt like I wasn't in control of anything, now I know I'm in control of my story. Because before that, instead of me being in control of my mind was in control of me and all these different things that was going on, the feelings, the emotions. So when I teach, I talk a lot about emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand now emotions is what it means to be human. Prior to
Yeah,
that,
right.
I was like, I'm not dealing with this because it makes me feel weak. It makes me feel inadequate. It makes me feel like I'm not a man because people told me, don't deal with your emotions or don't let anybody see them because they'll feel like you're weak. And as I grew and started learning, like you said, and start studying, I understood that emotions are what it means to be human. And it's my brain trying to heal from the things that I've seen because unfortunately, a lot of us as first responders have seen things that nobody should ever have to see
Yeah.
or touch things that nobody should ever have to touch. So kind of share my story and it's therapeutic to me.
This is like I'm actually genuinely curious because I don't know this. Is I in my world of like dealing with like athletes is I think a lot of people in my shoes like that are in my like what would be my role for them because I was like this early on is are scared to like tell their story, be vulnerable ultimately of I mean you're basically like literally you're building your connection because you're meeting them at their level, right? And so like for me, it's like the first thing I go in, it's like the entire first team meeting is an hour long of like how my life was like miserable,
Yeah.
right? And like how I was like stressed and overwhelmed. And everyone tells you, I'm like, fill in the blank. College is going to be the time of your, and they're like life. And I'm like, and you're stressed out. So that was full of shit, right? Like,
Exactly.
how are we going to navigate this? And so, because I think a lot of people like in my, that are in my shoes with them is their first interaction is like, look how many gold medals I've won and look how many national championships I have. And it's like, great, like so you're really good and like your life was awesome, like I don't like, and there, it's hard to build that connection when it's all about you, look at me, look how great I am, versus meeting them down at their level. And so I'm curious, is are people in your industry, people that are kind of in your position, are counselors, therapists, are they willing, the majority willing to share that story? Are they willing to meet them at people at their level? Or do you find that that is a hurdle kind of in the industry, quote unquote, so to speak? Because I think it's a major gap. Like I'll never forget, I won't say like which team, but there's recently as a team is, so I send out like individual, I send out a sign up sheet for like individual meetings. And this was heading into year one, like with a specific program. And I was kind of surprised, like there wasn't some names on the list. Like I thought people, I just thought there would be like other people. And then I went and shared the story, and like all those people came up to me. They're like, how do I meet with you? Like, how do I, like, what do I need to do? Right. And it was like, I didn't teach them anything. I didn't
Hmm.
like, I'm great. It was just like, oh, like he gets me. He feels that, or I feel what he like went through. I feel seen, I feel heard. And so I'm curious, is there a gap in the industry? Is there a gap of people willing? Most people are. That's good.
So here's the thing, because I can straddle the fence because I know the stress of being a college athlete. I know how sometimes we get our self worth, unfortunately, from other people grading us,
Yeah.
and we let other people hold the pen and write our stories instead of us writing our own stories. Because when you have a bad day, a bad game, you suck. If you miss a dunk like I did one time, you got people laughing at you like, dude, you shouldn't even be on the freaking team. It's just all the type of things that people don't understand what athletes behind the scene have to go through. So you constantly trying to validate yourself. Am I measuring up? Am I getting it done? So you go from, so in my instance, you go from McDonald's All American to coming off the bench. It's like,
Mm.
wait a minute. I was the man in high school. Now I missed out on playing football in college because I didn't qualify. Then I come to college playing basketball and I'm not the man. It's like, God. So, long story short, is emotions are emotions.
Yeah.
Disclosing is disclosing, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a nurse, whatever it is, emotions are emotions. And what I've learned through doing this is when we can find connection, and here's where when people learn this, you can only connect as deep and solid with other people as you can connect with yourself. To
Mm.
your point,
Mm.
is
Mm.
when you start sharing your story, what happens is you understand neurobiologically we're wired for connection. And when you speak about your story, it helps other people to connect with you. And that's real. That's being honest. That's being vulnerable. And that's where the magic happens. And a lot of people are not strong enough or willing enough to actually be vulnerable and let people see them and not worry about not seeing them as being perfect. And that's where we struggle. And what I've learned to do is just be me.
Yeah.
Because what I ask people when I come into the counseling session, I was like, hey, you want me to be diplomatic or you want me to really help you? Most time people say, man, I want you to help me. So what I do when appropriate, I disclose information to help them to be able to bridge the gap. And that's when I can honestly speak from my heart, that's when we actually make, I'm talking about leaps and bounds as far as their own personal journeys. That makes sense?
Yeah. 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 100%. So how much, like, I always think it's very kind of going back to like people that actually live it, because I just believe like most people like intellectually know a lot of things. Like I think that like intellectually a lot of people know that sharing our downfalls is what actually builds connection, because we're all dealing like with our own struggles. We all like most people intellectually, I think of a lot of coaches, right? Is they want to be seen as like they have all the answers, they're a great leader, that, they can lead the team to the promised land, so to speak. And so is I think they get nervous about sharing where they're like where they're struggling or where their hiccups are or what their journey was to like figure all this out. But like intellectually they know that that's what builds connection. But it comes back to me is I truly believe like the ultimate fear is the fear of being judged. Like that
So
is, and so I think that's where it's like there's this internal about like intellectually I know I need to tell this story, but internally it's like, what if they do think less of me? What if they do judge me? What if they do question if I can actually get them, a national title, a conference championship, like whatever the goal is? And so it's like this internal battle of like, do I do what I know, or do like I succumb to the fear of the emotion
let's talk
internally?
about two things.
Okay,
This
let's
is
go.
this is this is great that you said this. We're gonna talk about the 5 and 7, what I call it,
Okay.
and then we're gonna talk about perfectionism, which I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
So the 5 and 7 was this. So Brene Brown and her group, they did a study, 5 year period, 7,000 people, and they asked, when you are experiencing an emotion, I want you to write it down. And 7,000 people, 5 year period, the average number of emotions people were able to name were three: happy, sad, angry. And there are 87 emotions that are readily available to us. So the problem is like what you just said. So cognitively, we're high functioning. I mean, you got people like you said, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're Navy SEALs. They got all of this different stuff that's going on in their life cognitively. But our emotional language, she said, and I loved it when she said, I thought, well, that's me. She said, our emotional language is pre K,
Yeah.
because you've taught us all the time, be the silent warrior, deal with your own stuff. And as we got older, what I've learned is, well, you taught me to be isolated, but research says we're wired for connection. You told me to be the silent warrior, but the older I get, people crave for me to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is it?
Yeah.
So the thing is, what we got to do is, I've learned, is when we express emotions, when you and I talk, I know when I hit something that you are familiar with as far as emotions are concerned, because that's where the connection is. Because you've had hurts in the past, you've had pains in the past, we felt not validated in the past. And when I talk about those things and we have that connection, you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where the magic happens, because what it does is when you can let other people know that there's nothing wrong with you, it's what's right with you. And that's where, when I create environments for people, they can be able to walk through that difficult time knowing that I'm safe. Because when people don't feel safe, when people don't feel like they can share, they're not going to, and they're going to carry it back with them. And they're going to still have the same troubles that they walked in the door with, because I haven't helped them to be free. Because I might be the specialist as far as trauma is concerned, but they're
Mm-hmm.
the specialists of their lives. And when you can
Yeah.
empower people to be in control of their own lives, that's what helps people when they say, okay. And then they open up and then they start talking.
Okay, one statement, follow-up question. There's nothing wrong with you. That's what's right with you. I'm stealing that, just so you know.
That's good.
I will give credit where credit's due, but I'm taking that because I think that's like I just think back even like with my own journey is like as being an athlete, right? Like growing up is like Ryan was the wrestler, right? And so it was like all this like is everything was about like living up to the performance. It was, whether that be I mean, I competed for the varsity team in eighth grade, right? And so is in any time in large class. Okay, now Alabama's not a wonderful wrestling state, but it was like large class and doing something that honestly, I don't think really at the time anyone had done. I don't think it was legal before that, but like, I was like one of the first ones. And so it's like whether I was going to a high school tournament or if I was like traveling, out of season going to a national tournament, all the stress and worry came from is like people would look like, right, we always hear it's like relax, it's just a tournament, relax, it's just a competition. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like
Right.
this is everything. Because if I take third at this tournament, I don't want to go back to school. If I don't place at this national tournament, I don't want to go back to school because everyone's gonna be like, damn dude, like what happened, like what was
Bingo.
going on, right? And so that became, I was doing it for everybody else and never for myself. It was never for like the enjoyment. So no wonder I had a massive performance gap in like what I actually accomplished and what I like was capable and probably like should have accomplished because I couldn't
Hmm.
internally like deal with any of that. And so I'm curious, kind of this is my follow-up question is you said people basically in that study lump things down to like three emotions. And so one of the things I'm curious is when you're talking with people is part of that helping them get clarity on what they actually want to feel? Like I always think of, asking an athlete, it's like, okay, how do you define success? And then they tell, like, they write out, like, whatever it is for a season, for a month, for a competition. And so genuinely, like, my follow up is like, I'm like, great. Now, how does that make you feel? Right? Is that bring excitement? Does that bring, like, what is it that you're, because ultimately that's what you're after is I'll ask like a gymnast and they're like, I want to get a 10. And I'm like, okay, do numbers on a plastic card, is that what you want? Right? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, but that's what you're asking for. You're asking for somebody to hold up a plastic card with a black number taped to it. And they're like, okay, where are we going with this? I'm like, ultimately, is you that score is going to make you feel some type of way. So that's your ultimate goal. That's what you really want is that internal feeling. That's what you're craving. That's what you're desiring. Is the aha for me is like a lot of people that work with Deborah are business owners. And so she said, she's like, people come to them and they want to make more money. And she goes, great. Does paper make you happy? And they're like, well, no. She's like, but that's all money is, right? It's just paper, right? Is like, I get it. Like, it's a part of a lot of our decisions throughout the day. But what is the money? Like, what is the feeling that the money's going to give you? That's ultimately what you after. And if you can connect with that feeling, then those sorts of things will attract and unfold in your life. The freedom, the joy, the happiness, the excitement, the ability to travel, like whatever those things are. So I'm curious, is that part of kind of like your framework? Is helping people uncover of like, okay, we're lumping them into these three, but like really, what is it that you really want to feel?
Well, what happens is too, is I help people to get more granular, more specific, like you just did. You explained it perfectly. When you can get people to focus on what their real why is, because a lot of times we know the how and what, but what is your why?
Yeah.
And that's what you do. You walk people down the path of learning their why. What you just did also, which is beautiful, motivational interviewing, is evoking, is you have the answers from within yourself.
Mm.
Only thing I help people do is to pull it out. That's the reason I ask a lot of how and what questions. And when people see that they are in more control than they think they are, if they just shift one thing, because like you said last time, and I was like, yes, Brian, that's it. You need to be a therapist. It's when they can say, oh God, it's so high of a hill to climb. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Then they make one adjustment, and it's a lot easier for them to climb the mountain because you know what? They have an avenue of approach to attack the mountain. And that's what I do when people come into my office. I'm so overwhelmed. Okay, if we were to talk about the thing that has you overwhelmed, what would be the thing that you would change? And then you start seeing the light bulbs on as I ask the how and what questions. And I'm like you, I don't do a lot of stuff. I ask them the questions, and then I sit there and let them know you are empowered to take control of your own life. And don't let situations define you. You define the situation. And when people learn that and understand that the answers are from within, is then I see the connection as far as self-esteem.
Yeah.
I can do this because what I do is I scale everything too. Like, so the situation you're in right now, how stressful do you feel like it is? And I'll just ask them scale it. 1 to 10, 10's the worst, one's the least. And they'll give me that scale. And I'll ask, say, for example, if they say a 4, I say, well, what keeps it from being a 5? And then they give me
Mm.
the answer. And it's like, okay, so what would be the next step to help you to make it a 7? And then they'll give me the next answer. And those are the things I do. I just walk people down the path, similar to what you do. And what do you really want? But I don't give them the answer.
Yeah.
I make them search for the answer by understanding that the answers are from within what they want to accomplish. And don't let anybody else define that. You define that. And once they understand that they are empowered from within, then people are able to walk the path on their own.
Totally agree. Is I think that I don't know, like maybe this is just a little bit different, like in the athletic world, at least in my interactions with a lot of athletes, is I feel like certain things, buzzwords, self esteem, confidence, belief, all those things are tried to like, one, they're not taught appropriately because I have yet to be in a room where I'm like, okay, define that. And like they can't define it. So I was like, all right, let's give this word actual context so that we actually know that we're what we're trying to get here. Versus I think that people again, even a little bit like in the industry is it's almost shoved down their throat, like to your point, versus like them uncovering the answers. Because I can think of probably borderline daily conversations of a question and they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, first, that's okay. That's what we're gonna like. We understand and know it's like we have a gap now because we have to make a decision. We have to have contrast, right? Most of their world and their life is just intertwined, and it's like they can't make any decisions because like they think they're being this person, but they're actually being this person. So it's just like mass chaos and confusion. So it's like now that we have a gap of like, okay, I don't recognize this. Okay, what is it that you actually like want that to look like? And a lot of times, I don't know if it's the majority or not, but they'll want me to give them an answer, and I'm like, I've told you from day one, I will never give you an answer, nor would it even be appropriate for me to give an answer, right?
Right.
Because it's like you're not going to actually adopt that because I'm just telling you something and it's kind of shoved down your throat, so to speak. And so it might make you feel good right now, but you're not going to actually go out and live that because you haven't adopted it.
Let me tell you what the problem is, as you keep saying, your world is most of our lives, the performance is done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after the performance is done, what happens? They get graded.
Right.
And what people do is what they start learning or acting as though those grades are their identity.
Yeah.
So whatever you tell me I am, that's what I am. And when I see that on the paper, then either I'm doing good or I'm doing horribly. There is no in between because most of our athletic careers, after the game is over, you get a plus minus, you get whatever kind of grade you get. And based on that and how the coach talks to me, how the coach reacts to me, what kind of relationship we have off the court, on the court, off the field, on the field, wrestling mat, off the wrestling mat, that determines to me, because I've been graded all my life, who I am. Now, you and I both know that's not true,
Right.
but when I'm young, when I'm impressionable, that's all I know. When you talked about that card, well, this is all I know. You
Yeah.
showed me how to watch film. You showed me how to break things down. Well, you told me I'm not cutting it. You told me just get off the court. You suck. Well, that's it. That's what I hear. So I don't only suck on the court, I suck in life because you told me I suck in life. And that's where they can't make the separation when you talk about young athletes, because it's dependent upon what people say that I am, dependent upon how I perform on the court. That's what I see when they come in my office is me as a person, I suck because I have to deal in the guilt, in the shame of letting other people down. So I'm not cutting it. There's a big divide. I'm not checking all the boxes like people say I should check the boxes. So I suck, which leads to anxiety, depression, suicidality.
Yeah, and I think too with that is I'd love to get your perspective on this. Again, this is coming from like the athletes world, but a lot of them is they come to me and like in the early conversations, they'll be like, "So, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but like I'm comparing myself a lot." And so I go, "Time out, hold on." I go, "Is comparison good or bad?" And they were like, some say either bad or some will be like neutral, be like, it's neither. I'm like, okay, so like tell me when it's bad. Well, like when I'm looking at this person and I'm looking through Instagram and I'm comparing myself to like everybody else around me, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm like, when is it good? And honestly, it's like I don't even remember what a lot of their answers are. And so it's like, okay, so honestly, it literally just comes down to the meaning that you give it, right? And so is for a lot of them, I'm like, it can be good if you have defined your future version self and you're like, now it's like I can at the end of the day can take a step back is like if my future version self making this up, but like if it, you know, goes to bed on time and drinks the right amount of water or reads 10 pages is like I can without beating myself up I can look at it and be like am I living the highest version of myself, yes or no? And if the answer is no, it's like okay, then I need to like what behavior can I take, change, step into to get myself, inspire myself, motivate a little bit, but inspire myself to start living as the person that I defined. And so I'm curious with you, that's how, because I think comparing can be valuable. And so, like, what's your take on it as long as you're comparing to me to the right thing, which is it's you?
Here's my one liner: comparison is the thief of all joy.
So, is it blanket bad?
Here's the thing: if I'm 56 years old,
Yeah.
right? I know to answer your question, no, it's not all blanket bad, but I'm 56 years old, play college basketball. If I see somebody in the gym shooting, making good shots, what am I going to do? I'm going in, I'm like, you know what? Young whippersnapper, I still got it. I'm going to show you, right?
Yeah.
So, what I do if I take it out of context is my legs are not like they used to be.
Right.
My game is not what it used to be. So, the thing is, we're going to compare.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, to your point, what we got to do is we have to put it in perspective and understand what we have is just as valuable as somebody else's. Now, the competitive nature is going to come in, but what we do is when we get it out of focus, that's when we start having issues. Because
Yeah.
the thing is, if I try to measure myself to a 26-year-old, what am I actually doing to myself?
Yeah.
It's causing issues. So the thing is, comparison is okay, but it has to be marginalized. Because if I try
Mm.
to compare myself to a 26-year-old, is that fair to me? No. And the thing is it's saying that I'm not measuring up to the standard. Well, what standard am I using? What measurement am I using?
That, yes.
So that's where we got to be able to do it. Because if I feel like, oh, I'm falling short of standards, based off of what? And that's where the confusion comes in, because what we do is we have these blanket slates and it's not measurable. And then we feel like we're falling short of standards. And the wider the gap, the more depressed I am, especially if I'm really competitive. If I feel like the gap is like this here, and I know I need to be here, man, I'm so depressed that I can't even think of what the next move is because I've compared on a wrong type of scale.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I agree with that, and I think that that's where. So to give, if you actually look up the word, like standard means average or bare minimum. So when somebody says of like hey, you need to meet the standard is like, okay, you need to meet the average, you need to meet the bare minimum. Now, most people, to your point, like don't even know what that is, or they've let somebody else 100% define what that standard is.
Bingo.
And so I think that that's where getting them, I mean, step one, honestly, like in my experience, is like most people just don't have clarity. Like most people don't really know what they want. They don't really know what it looks like. They don't really know the feelings that they're after. They don't really know what words mean. To the standard point is, they don't really know what their standards are, and that's where I always say it's like that's the hard work, right? It's getting clear on that, especially in the athletic world. Is like it's not running more sprints per se. It's not more push-ups and, more reps. Like that will like incrementally help you, but you want to take a quantum leap is like get clear on those things and
Hmm.
like it'll be steady, 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 steady. And then all of a sudden you will literally, if the light bulb will go off and you'll go like this, like literally off the page.
Right.
The hard part, actually, I'm curious about this. I'll draw it out, show you. Is because I think that one of the lies that we're told is you just gotta get a little bit better, just a little bit better, just a little bit better, a little bit better. And so like people like overwhelm themselves like every single day. And so what I draw like this with the athletes on a chart is like that's a little bit better, right? Is there's incremental betters. I said, or if you get really clear on what you want, is like it's this teeny tiny like growth. It's not a flat line, but it's like you can barely see it. And so if this is on the bottom, show you like time frame like 1 month down here. Then if we both start at the same position, at that 1 month mark is person one, and person two when they have clarity is the incremental person is here after 1 month. The person that understands and gets really clear is willing to wait a little bit to take that quantum leap in 1 month. It's like they're so far ahead of this other person that like they're probably never going to catch them. But what's the hurdle is all during this time person one is ahead of them. And so they're looking and they're like, yeah, but they're ahead of me. Yeah, they're ahead of me. I need to go do what they're doing. I need to go do what they're doing. I'm like, no, it's a game, right? It's chess, not checkers. And if
Correct.
you're willing to get really clear and start to live as this person, is just give it a little bit of time because when it clicks is you're gonna jump so far ahead of these other people. And like for me, like that's the game that I'm always playing with athletes is when it clicks, you're gonna like literally catapult. And this other person, because in the next month is the same thing's gonna happen, right? Somebody, and then you're gonna go off the page, right? And so while they may be coming here, it's like you're gonna feels like a flat line, and then you're gonna take another jump. And like that's life. That's the game that you're playing. Yeah, but it's just like most people don't have that clarity. And so like they live their life off of like hoping that the next day is just like just gets a little bit better. It's almost like they don't have, I mean, I don't know, clarity is everything.
Yes, because here's the thing. You said something major. When you don't know the definitions to certain words, you can't get the clarity. And without clarity, you can't get understanding. And without understanding, you get stuck. And that's where a lot of people are. They're stuck because they don't know the definition to some of the words that people are presenting to them. Example, most people, when I ask them, what does the word, you hear the word vulnerability, what's the first
Mm-hmm.
thing to come to your mind? They say, most times, weakness. It's like, but it's actually totally the opposite. When I'm
Yeah.
talking with first responders, what I ask them, I was like, so have you ever been to a domestic dispute call? Obviously, they have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, and you still went? Like, yeah. I was like, why? Because it's my job. I said, okay. I said, so yeah, it's your job, but you still went and you didn't know the outcome? I was like, no, I didn't know the outcome. I said, but you still went. Yeah. Were you a little nervous? Well, yeah. I was like, but you still went, right? It's like, yeah. It's like, so you said vulnerability is weak, correct? It's like, yeah. It's like, so you went to a call, you didn't know what the outcome was, You was nervous, but you know the situation was bigger than you, but yet you still went. That's like, yeah, it's like, well, guess what? That's an example of vulnerability. And we need to know what certain words mean because what
Mhm.
we do is we'll show up on things and we'll misrepresent what it really means. And that's what we do in life a lot of times. We have
Mm.
certain strengths, we have certain things, but we'll minimize what we have based off of what other people have told us. And that's what some of your athletes have done is they have greatness within them. And like when you talked last time, they have their superpower, but they let
Hmm.
people strip them because they're putting their own definition to their strengths.
That's really good. That's really good because I think I like that, like your kind of presentation on vulnerability, because I like when behaviors can be attached to words. And that's right. Like when you can attach actual behaviors, I think people can actually see that. And I think the other hurdle too is going back to like words is like people have tied a bunch of words together, right? When I ask them like, what's confidence? And they're like, belief. I'm like, what else? They're like, trust. So I'm like, what is trust? And they're like, well, belief and I'm like, well, what is? I'm like, that you've now confused me because what do I really want? Do I want belief? Do I want trust? Do I want confidence? And so they have all of these words like bundled together, and it's like, well, no wonder there's mass chaos in your head because it's like you have one coach tell you to have confidence and you have another coach tell you to believe in yourself. It's like, is that the same thing? And then it's like, what does that actually mean? Like, well, just trust yourself. It's like, okay, what does that mean? And so they don't ever know what they're after. And so I
Right.
think that's another thing too, is to your answer of like vulnerability is like, well, don't be weak. Well, then like don't, I don't know, there's just too many words like mixed up
Right.
versus when you can just show a behavior, it's like, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. Like I can
Yeah.
actually live and go do that.
Yes. Singular. Tell me how to get to certain location. If you tell me three different ways and I've never been there, how confusing is that to me?
Yeah. Oh, ooh, that's a good analogy.
Right? I mean, tell me one way. I'm talking to you. I'm looking at you for direction. I'm not listening to anybody else. I'm listening to you. How do I get there?
That's good.
And that's what
That's
we do. We
good.
confuse ourselves. We have so many things we try to pull, and we confuse our own self. To your point, because what we're doing is trying to pull all these different words, and we don't know what they mean. Put them all in one box, shake them up, and just pull them out. And we get so confused of who we are as individuals. I've been there so much, didn't know who I was. And you know what I was trying to do? And you've heard this saying, I was wearing whatever mask you wanted me to
Yeah.
wear, whatever time I needed to wear it. And I think that's what a lot of your kids are doing. They're wearing whatever mask you ask me to wear at a certain time. And they wake up and they're so confused, they're so anxiety filled, and they're so depressed because they don't know what they need to heal.
I always tell them, I say, you try on identities like you try on clothes.
Yes, there you go. There you go.
And then the step further with that is based off of kind of like how you dress, I can tell you who you're trying to be. Because most of the time, at least for most kids, young adults, is like nowadays, is like the majority, maybe not everybody, but the majority is like they're trying to wear something to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so fascinating because it's like you don't really want to fit in, right? Like especially as an athlete, like if you want to be, I'll go to the extreme. Like if you want to be a national champ, well, like by definition, there's only one of those.
Right.
Like you actually don't want to fit in. Another word is like because I have people, they're like, well, I want to be a national champ, I want to be a conference champ, I want to do this. I'm like, okay, so you want to be exceptional. They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so by definition, the definition of exceptional is to be the exception. So you're going to be lonely. If you're not misunderstood, then you're not doing it right because then you're
Mm.
just fitting in. And so it's like when you're misunderstood, then you know you're on the right path. But until you're misunderstood, is like you're probably not on the right path.
You know, you made me think of something. Is it, do you want to fit in or do you want to be where you belong? Because fitting in, I change who I am. I
Yeah.
try to be what I feel like you want me to be. But when I am where I belong, people accept me for my strengths, for my weaknesses, just for who I am. And to your point, sometimes that path is lonely, it's hard, and it takes some grit to get there. And the older I get, the more I learn, you know what? I'm going to be in the group where I belong. I'm
Yes.
not fitting in anymore because fitting in, I'm compromising who I am as an individual. I'm going to be in the group for who I am, and people celebrate me just because of I am who I am, and I'm not compromising who I am as a person. I quit that several years ago because I used to try to fit in because it was comfortable to me
Mm-hmm.
on the outlook of it. But inside, I was not comfortable until I went to the places where I belong. And once I found where I belong, a lot more comfortable, a lot easier because guess what? I'm not compromising who I am, and I can be more consistent.
And I think too is, especially for like young adults, is like this is one of the hardest things is
Yes.
like the people that you're hanging around like right now. I'll like just straight up ask. I'm like, would you want to trade places? Like, would you want to be in their life? And it's
Right.
like when they take a step back, it's like the majority of the time they're like, not really, right? And so it's like, why would you want to be around people that you wouldn't trade places with? And so I literally had an athlete recently like pick up the phone and call. It's like, I like took a step back and it was like the group that I'm around is like they do things, they like partake in things that like doesn't really align with who I am. It's like their academics aren't aligned with like who I am, right? Their relationships in terms of like intimate relationships aren't aligned with like who I am. She's like literally listed off like six or seven things. And I was like, okay, so what's the gift that I could give you? And like thought, and I was like, the ability to actually make that decision to extract yourself, because that's going to be the hard part. If I could give you the
Yes.
gift, because I was like, you're going to get hate. Like you are going to get criticized. Like just like prepare yourself because these have been your people, right? Whether I don't know how long they've been, a year, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years, it doesn't really matter. They're gonna like I read this one time. It was like when people criticize you about changing, it's their inability to compliment you on your growth.
Yes.
And so, like, that's like one of the messages for them. I was like, you're just growing, and that's okay. But just know the hate is coming.
The thing is, I think where you and I connect a lot on is because what I feel like both of us have done is we finally walked in a room and understand we belong. This is who I am. This is my gift to you. This is me creating an environment to let you know it's okay. It's actually opening doors for people. Be like, hey, if you look down the hall, there's no confusion. It's going to be a straight path as long as you put your mind into walking the path. Yes, there's going to be distractions off to the side, but are you willing to walk the straight path? Straight path is hard,
Yes.
especially when you got distractions and you got the undisciplined as opposed to if I walk straight, I'm disciplined. And you got all the naysayers saying it doesn't take all of that when me and you know it takes all of that and then more. I think it's when we finally locked into it after we got off our amygdala
Yeah.
hijacking of my drinking, of my sleeping around, because I was trying to validate myself. I'm like, I gotta connect. And it wasn't even all about that stuff. It was me trying to find me
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't understand. And I think that's what happened to a lot of these other kids is they're like, I just want to be able to fit in and be like everybody else. But then they don't want to be like everybody else. And that's what's confusing to them. Because what happens is, am I going to lower my standards to fit in? Or am I going to be strong enough to stand out? And that's where I came to the conclusion, you know what? I am going to be different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it was hard when I was younger to be different because what happened is nobody taught me the discipline to do it. single parent home, trying to do it on my own, trying to figure it out was hard. And then you got people on the sideline trying to tear you down, trying to discourage you because they didn't have discipline on their own. And like what you just said, people are not comfortable with themselves. So I'm going to tear you down so you can't get to the place that I know I can't get to. And that's when that comes to having that mentor, having somebody to encourage you, having somebody to cheer you on in your spot of where you belong and not fitting in. That's where the difference is made, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. And when that tear you down is one of the lines that I try to like give the athletes too is I was like, you remind them of the work that they're not doing that they know they should be doing. And so I was like, that's hard for them because it's like they know they should be doing that and they're not. And the fact that you are scares them. And they know that you're going to get ahead. They know that you're going to move along. They know you're going to take that jump and they're going to still be trying to like just get a little bit better incrementally over time. And so is your ability to recognize that in real time and still to your using your analogy to be able to like continue down the path because I define commitment as eliminating distractions. And so it's, how committed are you is based off of how many distractions you can eliminate. And so
Right.
is because if you can eliminate every distraction, then you are the most committed person.
Right.
Right. And so it's a lot of times athletes are like, oh, I'm committed. And it's like, oh, like you got a lot of distractions. You're pulled in a lot of different ways. You're trying to bounce around and fit in all over the place. So,
Dude, it took me for the longest to be able to eliminate the distractions because I was like, these distractions help me to numb the pain that I'm feeling. I don't want to
right,
feel this
right.
pain. So what I'm
Yeah.
going to do is I'm going to let it distract me because this makes me not have to deal with that voice in my head. And I got a lot of them taking me a lot of different places. And I just want to numb myself. And she said, I look good. She said, I'm cool. Well, they're drinking. I'm going to drink too because I don't want to have to deal with it because I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's,
Well,
go
it's
ahead.
interesting too, especially like with like the drinking is because I can like contest to that is while in the moment it might feel better, the next day is like 10 times worse. 10 times worse. Because then
Yes.
it's like you literally lay there and know it's like you're just basically like fuck I'm being fake. This is awful. Like but then you give into all the external power to your point of like throughout this whole conversation it's we do have control of our brains yet we haven't been equipped, we haven't been taught, we haven't like we don't know how to actually control it. And so it's like we just literally let it run wild. And for, young adults is that's where you become, as I always say, it's like you're really good at disempowering yourself because it's like you just don't have control of your brain. And I'm actually curious like how you kind of approach this a little bit too. Is I had an athlete recently because we were talking about empowering themselves and like it's an art, like it has to be practiced, blah 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 blah. And she was just like, "Why is it so hard to like empower ourselves?" And I was like, "Well, if you want me to nerd out on you for 10 seconds," I was like, it's actually how you were designed. It wasn't built to make you happy. It was built on survival. It was built on, when you hear a voice, when you're laying in bed and you hear a little creak, it's like everything alerts, right? It's like now you're like fight or flight, right? It's like now you hear it's like hyper, right? Like now you hear the wind and the bird outside and you're wondering what all these things are. And so it was built to help you survive. So it's why you have to be so diligent right now about empowering yourself and you have to train it that way because it's just naturally good at finding what's wrong. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the art of like why so many people struggle with celebrating things or empowering themselves or I call it bragging on yourself, right? Because you're just not wired that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's amazing that you bring up the fight, flight, freeze type thing because it's man, your little thumbs down, your thumbs up thing be
I
getting
don't know.
me.
Like literally, I said something like really depressing earlier, and it was like thumbs up, and I was like, oh Jesus.
Oh, it did
Freaking
this when I started talking.
like balloons are going to be going off here in a second. Fireworks. It's like every meeting I have, they're like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "I don't know. I've literally tried to turn this off on the back end of Zoom so many times, and I got to figure this out because
Oh,
it
that's funny.
is low key distracting."
So the thing is when you talk about the brain and the alarm going off, it made me think about the amygdala when it
Mm-hmm.
gets out of balance. Because what happened is it's the alarm center. It's like me and you, if we know, all right, I got Ryan at 9 o'clock. So the alarm goes off on my phone 10 minutes ahead of time. So I know, hey, you know what? You can stop worrying. You're on time. You got it.
Yeah.
But what happens is when it's out of balance, I can't turn that alarm off and it goes off over and over and over again. And the thing is, in life, sometimes when it gets out of balance, because we do have control of it, but here's what we do is we will not take control of those things. It's just like I just drew a blank. It'll come back to me. But what we'll do is we'll just let things go, and I teach my people to do thought stopping. Because
Mm.
what we think a lot of times is because we have a negative thought with a negative outcome, we make it true. And I ask, what's the probability of that feared outcome actually happening? And then they give me the probability. Well, it's really low. So what I teach people to do is thought stopping. Challenge the thought. Just because the thought came to your head doesn't necessarily make it true. And a lot of times what people do is they think because the thought came to my head is true. No.
Mm.
What we got to do is you are in control. Let's do some thought stopping techniques. Okay, the thought that I had, what's the probability of this actually happening? How true is it? And if it is true, what means do I need to take to change it, the outcome? When people are challenged to take control of their own environment, they feel more empowered once they learn to do it, not while the crisis is going on, but while things are going pretty well. And we learn how to control our environment, and it helps us to be able to walk those paths when things get a lot more difficult. But it comes with training your brain prior to fight, flight, or freeze situations actually being encountered. But people don't teach us these skill sets. And so when it
Yeah.
happens, we feel all out of sort. And what we do is we start grasping for the first thing that comes. And a lot of times when we get impulsive, we make horrible decisions because we don't know how to sit with our emotions.
I like that a lot. I'm curious on what your thoughts are on like kind of like I guess my approach is a lot of times like when athletes because I always say like preparation creates certainty. The more you prepare, the more certain you're going to have, whether it be before a test, whether it be before like being a police officer, whether being in the military, is you're going to have more certainty the more you feel prepared, right? Like if you shipped me off to war right now, or if I had to go on like a police, like I would literally be horrible. Like, I have zero preparation, so the anxiety would be probably more than like anybody's like ever been on. And so I think in the athletic world is a lot of times is that's just a signal that okay it's like how do we prepare for this and so when they have negative thoughts is part of that preparation is loading them up with one or two questions to shift what that thought is and having the answers ready because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have the answers ready is then your brain is just going to go tenfold down this other side. So it's like if I'm having stress anxiety about like my performance and my question is like, okay, but like what is it that I actually want? Right? Most people don't know, or what is it that I want to feel after this performance or after this competition. If you don't have an answer prepared, is like, I'm stressed. What is it that I want to feel? See, I told you so. You do suck. You don't even know what you want, idiot. Right? Like, and it just sends us down like the worst rabbit hole. And so for me, I'm curious what your thoughts are on my approach, so to speak, of like empowering them with a question or two, but also the answer, so it can shift out a little bit more of out of this unwanted negative response thought process and into more something that you do want to feel and having the clarity of like what it actually looks like.
Well, thing I would go back to is trust your training. And here's the thing: what I've learned, we do simulations training, and we do it with blanks. Well, the gun when it fires sounds the same.
Yeah.
When the fight, flight, freeze, the sympathetic nervous system fires off and the heart rate goes up, boom, I'm actually training. So what I mean when I'm talking about trusted training, what I've learned from over the years, when I first started policing, we did simulation training. Things were unfolding so fast. I was like, oh my God, how in the world can we actually make sure we process things the right way? You know, when I was on the sim, I was like, why does the screen keep going blank? He said, because you keep getting killed. So what I learned over the years is when I start trusting my training and I actually start doing it over and over and over again, and I had a prepared answer, I can't tell you the amount of information I learned I can process in 2 and 3 seconds in a shoot, don't shoot situation because I put myself in that environment. In
Mm-hmm.
council, we call it flooding. So what I
Mm-hmm.
do is I put myself in an environment that I know is not comfortable with me at the beginning. And the more I'm in that environment, the more comfortable I come and I can actually start processing things around me a lot more because the brain is so sophisticated that what I can do is I can process, I can think, I can move, I can make a decision because I prepared myself to deal with that. And that's some of the same things that I teach people in environments that they're uncomfortable with. The more you're in that environment, to your point, and you help people to know there's different approaches that you can take to help you to move through that effectively, then I start seeing progress. You know, back to the analogy. So if something were to happen and I had to go outside and something actually got out of control, I know from all of my training, 32 years, I can process, I can move, I can get off what we call the X, the danger spot, and be in the best position to be able to survive and thrive through that thing that may pose uncomfortability to me because of I go back to my training, know I have the answers, know I have something to pull from. And that's, I think, to your point, when you're teaching your athletes, hey, even in the most nerve wracking situations, go back to your training and hit your spots. You're going to be able to do it if you'll trust what you've done over and over and over again. You've been here before. The time frame is just different, but you know how to react to it. And once people can lock into that, they'll be just fine.
Yeah. I like that word flooding. I call it stacking your deck,
Okay.
right? Like deck of cards. Like how many cards do you have that like in that moment of like uncertainty? So I can play this one, 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 to where it just becomes, I use the word undeniable, where it's like there literally is no reason I shouldn't succeed, right? Like
Correct.
there, I literally have so much evidence. I can flood myself with so much proof, evidence that like why would this not happen, right? To
Right.
your point of asking the question of like probability, it's like there's literally like unless just something odd happens, right? Like, and that's just the game, right? Like that's just the nature of sports in general. Is I always say it's the casino, right? It's like
Right.
no game in the casino guarantees you 100%, but you typically want to play the games that give you
Right.
the highest probability of winning. So it's like that's what we're trying to create in sports too.
I can tell you something that really helped me in sports is when you learn how to break down film and you know what the opponent is going to do. I remember back 100 years when I played football, is when the coaches really prepared us and my eating was right, my sleeping was right, my conditioning was right. I'm telling you, I was so amazed. I was like, I can play this game full speed the entire game. I'm able to go and intercept the ball because I know what the opponent is going to do because they have prepared me so well. And we were shocked. I was like, man, we're gonna beat the county seat team that we have never beat because we are so prepared. I'm just reacting. I'm not even trying to guess. I'm just reacting because I prepared myself to be able to move through it and get to my spots where I need to be. And that's what we can do when we teach our kids when they're prepared. You don't even have to think. Just react.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. All right. All right. Two questions left.
All right.
First one is I mentioned earlier, like if I had a, like in that conversation with a certain kid, I was like, if I could give you one thing, right? And so part of that is like, if you have like a superpower that everyone that walks into your office is like at the beginning is like, if I can just give you this, like not everything, but like, like you're going to take this massive leap. And so in that scenario for that athlete, it was like if I can give you anything, it's the ability to make decisions because people that make decisions the fastest, they're going to grow the fastest, right? And so, what would you say is like as one of my coach puts it, like your magic wand superpower is when you know internally is like when I can give them or they can adopt this gift within their own personality. What would you say is your superpower?
When I can get them to understand, as soon as your eyes open on a new day, you're good enough.
So worthiness. Yeah, that's a
I had
good
so
one.
many people that have walked in my office. It's like you do realize as soon as your feet hit the floor, you're good enough. Tears. Because so many times in people's life, they have been told indirectly, you're not good enough. And when I embrace them with those emotional words, regardless of what's going on in your life, regardless of what situations that you're dealing with, you're good enough and they feel seen and heard. Oh man, it's just like, that's
I
my
love it.
superpower to a lot of my people.
Yeah. I love that because early on when I was working with Deborah and like, Ryan, what do you want? How do you define success? Defines it. And then she was just like, okay, why are you deserving to have that? It's like, I don't know. And she was just like, can you come up with anything? And I was like, not really off the top of my head. And she's like, well, what if we just start with you deserve because you exist? And
Bam.
I was like, that's a good one. That makes me think
Same thing,
of like
same
that. Yep.
principle.
Yep. And so that's kind of been hardwired from early on. And my mentorship from her is like, if I ever question anything, it's like I can always fall back on at least one thing. There's always one thing I can always fall back on. It's like, you deserve because you exist. So that one strikes. All right. Last question. If you were in a stadium with 100,000 people and you could only leave them with one message, what would your message be?
Ooh, ooh. Write your own story and don't let anybody else write it for you. We have all been given a unique pen, and your pen is just as good as anybody else's. And the words that you pen are very powerful and they're specific to you. Use them wisely.
That's good. Good. You're the creator of your reality. Yeah. And I think that the more people recognize that, just internal power, right? It goes back from what you said all at the beginning is like everything comes from within. And when you can write your story from within and not from without externally, then becomes one that to your point prior, it becomes one that when your feet hit the ground, it becomes inspiring because it's your
Right?
story. Yeah.
And the thing is, when people can say that to me, like, hey, man, you're right. I'm unique. I'm important. Because everybody wants to feel important. And when I
Yeah.
can just share, you're important. When your feet hit the ground, you're just as important as anybody else. Despite
Yeah.
what title you have as far as a job's concerned, you're just as important as the next person. And all of us want to be seen and heard. And when I can be seen and heard, I feel like I'm getting it done, just like everybody else, no matter what position I'm in. I'm there in the arena with everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it, man. Well, this has been fun. Always good to chat. Yeah, I was very intrigued by, especially some of the influential, like because you've had influence in different like buckets throughout your life, whether it be sports as an athlete, whether it be as an officer, whether it be as a negotiator, whether it now as be as like a counselor and therapist. So it's like that was one of the like intriguing things of like how do all those things like intertwine and mesh in the things that you've learned to influence people, right? Because you're just influencing them to take control of their own life.
Well, it's all the same. It's the same thing, same stuff that you're doing. It's just
Yeah,
in a different arenas. We're just in different arenas. Just like wrestling's a little bit different, but the emotions are the same.
yeah,
Baseball is on a ballpark, but the emotions are the same. Basketball's on the court, the emotions are the same. Football's on the field, but the emotions are the same. In the council room, it's in humans, but the emotions are the same. It's you investing in other people's lives from a perspective which they can understand. And then once you get people being able to understand and they can relate to you, then it comes all unfolding and you can just assist people. That's all it is, just assisting. And
yeah.
you're a great assister.
I'm the John Stockton,
Yes, you're the assist. You're the
little
assist
short
master.
white dude.
You are the assist master, you know? And that's what it's all about.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yep.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll do round two at some point.
Splice it up, make it look good.
Ugh, ugh, ugh. A lot of things. I'll end and then I'll tell you my process on everything.
Well, go ahead and end it because I want to hear this.
Okay. All right. Until next time, everybody. Well, actually, let me end this way. As always, the whole point of all these episodes is for you to take one nugget, right? Is as we talked about prior, is what is it that you can actually implement and live? It's not like what was your aha moment that you can take on and behave in a certain way and add to your personality. So until next time, everybody, peace.